श्री श्री राधा गोपीनाथ भगवान की जय। यथाय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमा श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। Hare Krishna. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 4, chapter 9. Dhruva Maharaj returns home. Text number 34. Mayetat prartitam vyartam chikitseva gatayushi prasadya jagadatmanam tapasa dushprasadanam bhavachidam ayacheham bhavam bhagya vivarjitah mayetad prartitam vyartam chikitseva gatayushi prasadya jagadatmanam tapasa dushprasadanam bhavachidam ayacheham bhavam bhagya vivarjitah mayetat prartitam vyartam chikitseva gatayushi prasadya jagat atmanam tapasa dushprasadanam bhavachidam ayacheham bhavam bhagya vivarjitah. Gatayushi prasadham jagadatmanam tapasa dushprasadanam bhavachidam ayacheham bhavam bhagya vivarjitah. Mayaitad prartitam vyartam chikitseva gatayushi prasadya jagadatmanam Sadushprasadanam Bhavachidam ayacheham Bhavam bhagya vivarjitaha Mayetat prartitam vyartam Chikitseva gatayushi Prasada jagadatmanam Tapasa dushprasadanam Bhavachitam ayacheham Bhavam bhagya vivarjitaha. Anyone else? Mayetat prartitam vyartam Chikitseva gatayushi Prasadya jagadatmanam Tapasa dushprasadanam Bhavachidam ayacheham Bhavam bhagya vivarjitaha Mayetat pratitam vyartam Chikitseva gatayushi Tapasa dushprasadanam Bhavachidam ayacheham Bhavam bhagya vivarjitaha. Word for word. Maya, by me. Etad, this. Prartitam, prayed for. Vyartam, uselessly. Chikitsa, treatment. Iva, like. Gata, has ended. Ayushi, for one whose life. Prasadya, after satisfying. Jagad Atmanam, the soul of the universe. Tapasa, by austerity. Dushprasadanam, who is very difficult to satisfy. Bhavachidam, the personality of Godhead, who can cut the chain of birth and death. Ayache, prayed for. Aham, I. Bhavam, repetition of birth and death. Bhagya, fortune. Vivarjitaha, being without. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. You can repeat after me. It is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in my case, although I have satisfied the super soul of the whole universe, I have prayed only for useless things. My activities were exactly like treatment given to a person who is already dead. Just see how unfortunate I am, for in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord, who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same conditions again. Purport. Sometimes it so happens that a devotee engaged in the loving service of the Lord desires some material benefit in exchange for this service. This is not the proper way to discharge devotional service. out of ignorance, of course. Sometimes a devotee does so, but Dhruva Maharaj regrets his personal behavior in this connection. Translation again, it is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in my case, although I have satisfied the super soul of the whole universe, I have prayed only for useless things. My activities were exactly like treatment given to a person who was already dead. Just see how unfortunate I am, for in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord, who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same conditions again. Om Jnanatimurandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mugam Karoti Vachalam Pongam Vandayate Giviyat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Kintaranam Paramam Nimaranam Shri Chittageshwaram. Hare Krishna. Welcome to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We're continuing reading about Dhruva Maharaj and how he finishes his austerities in the forest. Can anyone remember exactly how we've come to this section? So we've heard about how the Supreme Lord appeared before Dhruva Maharaj and he offered prayers. So how did we come to this point where Dhruva Maharaj is repenting or regretting he's approaching the Lord for material benefit? What's happened in between? Yeah. Yeah, that's of course what happens next. That after offering prayers, the Lord tells him that to continue ruling for I think it was 36,000 years. Yes, and then after that he'll go back to his abode, Dhruvaloka. Yeah. But there's something else that happens in between. That's correct, but that's previous to the prayers being offered. I'm talking about after the prayers were offered. What happened from the prayers finishing to this point now? Because it's very important. How we got to this point here is very important. You see, after the prayers, anyone from this side? Can anyone remember? No? See, after the prayers were offered, then Prishnigarbha, he offered Dhruva Maharaj his benedictions. In fact, he even told Dhruva Maharaj how his stepmother and stepbrother would pass away. Because that was one of the main causes for Dhruva Maharaj's performing the sacrifice or the austerity, so to speak. Which is quite interesting. But that's a side point. After he left, it's mentioned specifically, after the Supreme Lord left for his abode, it's mentioned specifically that Dhruva Maharaj felt dissatisfied. He felt displeasure. And this is when Vidura asked Maitreya that, wait a second, when one meets the Lord, when one performs devotional service, what to speak of meeting the Lord, there should be some pleasure, some satisfaction of heart. How is it that Dhruva Maharaj is feeling this way? And so now Maitreya is opening up what Dhruva Maharaj is going through. And this is a special feature of Srimad Bhagavatam, that we get to go into the minds of the pure devotees and understand what is their thought process, what is their bhava, what is their mood. What is it that they're offering to the Lord that the Lord cannot resist but come and accept their service. Like when you read Krishna book, there's a specific section after Krishna marries the 16,100 queens. He rescues them from Bhaumasura. At the end of that chapter, suddenly Prabhupada, Shukadeva Goswami of course, but Prabhupada explains how when he took all his wives back to Dwarka, Krishna acted just like a normal husband for them. But what was the mood of all the wives? Their mood was that we're simply his maidservant. They didn't think that we're his wives. They took the position of the head maidservant, and they served him to the best of their capability. because they knew that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He doesn't have to become their husband to accept their service. But because of his love and affection, that he voluntarily took the position of a normal husband in the relationship of a husband and wife to accept their loving service. And out of such gratitude, they rendered service to the best of their capability. They didn't even let one single maidservant do the service. That's how particular they were with their service. So you can see that the devotees of the Lord understand how to serve the Lord, and we understand their mood. And that begins with Trinadapi Sunichina, Taroreva Saheshna, Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. That's this humility and this gratitude that comes from performing devotional service to the Lord and understanding one's real position. Because it says here, Dhruva Maharaj is specifically saying it is very difficult to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it is true, it is very difficult. Because what does Krishna demand in Bhagavad Gita? Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam braja. But unfortunately we're so attached to this material world. We're so attached that even though the opportunity is there to go back to Godhead, just see how unfortunate I am. For in spite of meeting the Supreme Lord, who can cut one's link with birth and death, I have prayed for the same conditions again. It is like going to a doctor. You have a disease, right? And the doctor cures you, or has the ability to cure you. And what do you ask from the doctor? Please extend my disease further. Like a foolish child, right? They don't have to go to school if you extend their disease, yeah? But the parents know if the child's disease is, or the child stays at home longer than needed, he or she will not get the education they need to be able to progress in life. So in the same way, Prabhupada gives this example actually of this mentality. He says that, he gives a story of how once an old lady was walking, on the highway, and she was carrying a bundle of sticks on her head. Okay? And it's mentioned that at one point she tripped and all the bundle of wood fell down. And in that circumstance, in that difficult position, she called out for Krishna. Krishna, Govinda. And then it's mentioned that Krishna appeared. And Krishna said, my dear servant, what would you like? And she said, my dear Lord, please, I tripped over and this fell on the ground. Please put it back on my head. Maya Sukhaya Bharam Udbhavatho Mimudhan. Prahlad Maharaj prays that for me, I have no problems, my Lord, because I am intensely and loudly glorifying your qualities, your pastimes. But what my concern is this for these fools and rascals who are simply engaged in material existence, in enjoying the senses, in carrying an unnecessary burden on their head. It's very important to understand, because attachment is such that we don't realize what is it that we need and we don't need. And it's so difficult to understand this if we're stuck in the modes of material nature. We need to get rid of this idea that we can practice Krishna consciousness and sense gratification side by side. It is not possible. In fact, 3rd canto Srimad Bhagavatam talks about devotional service in the modes. It is not that devotional service is contaminated by the modes. It is that the practitioner is unfortunately contaminated by the modes and is not letting themselves become purified by devotional service. And in that situation, they exhibit these qualities of devotional service so-called in the modes. And if you read that section, you'll see the difficulties one goes through. Right? In devotional service, what is it? What are the characteristics? Can anyone remember Bhagavad Gita, anywhere in the Shastra? When one practices devotional service, how does one feel? For example, Shushukam Kartam Avyayam. One feels blissful, happy in performing devotional service. Anything else? Blissful and happy? Yeah, okay. Anything else? Connected with Krishna, peaceful, humble, satisfied. Anything else? Continuously remembering Krishna, yes. Anything else? By practicing devotional service, what is the product? Ecstasy, purification, Krishna Prem. That's what Vidura was questioning. I'll go back to it. It's very, very interesting that Vidura is asking this very simple question. My dear Brahmana, the abode of the Lord is very difficult to attain. It can be attained only by pure devotional service, which pleases the most affectionate, merciful Lord. Dhruva Maharaj achieved this position even in one life, and he was very wise and conscientious. Why then was he not very pleased? Maitreya answered, Dhruva Maharaj's heart, which was pierced by the arrows of the harsh words of his stepmother, was greatly aggrieved, and thus when he fixed upon his goal of life, he did not forget her misbehavior. He did not demand actual liberation from this material world, but at the end of his devotional service, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared before him, he was simply ashamed of the material demands he had in his mind. So, I'm not quite sure if we passed this point, but Prabhupada says in the purport that we should be very careful of this. We don't want to end up in this situation where we regret what we've done in Krishna consciousness, where we would have had the opportunity to advance, but we did not take it. But in spite of that, a devotee actually feels like they're not utilizing Krishna's time effectively. It's one of the characteristics of bhava. Does anyone know the Sanskrit for that word? It's called avyata kalatam. And it means that they engage every single moment in Krishna's service. And they also regret that in the past I have not engaged my senses in Krishna's service. That I've simply wasted my life. Hari Hari vi phale janama goyeno. Right? And Prabhupada says that actually this is one of his favorite bhajans. That knowingly I have drunk poison. I did not worship Radha and Krishna, and knowingly I have drunk poison. Knowingly I have drunk poison. Very similar situation or feeling in which Dhruva Maharaj is feeling here. So, in this purport, Prabhupada's explaining the qualities of a person that comes to Krishna consciousness. And this has been mentioned so many times, but it's very good to repeat. Does anyone know from Bhagavad Gita how Krishna explains who comes to his devotional service? Anyone? Yes. What are the 4 types of people? Uh-huh. No, go for it. Go for gold. Uh-huh. Yep. That's a tricky one, yeah. Anyone else? Curious? Inquisitive? Yeah, okay. One who seeks knowledge and one who's inquisitive. There's a slight difference between them. But yeah, so there are 4. Artha jignasu artati jnani chabartarshaba. One who seeks wealth, one who's distressed and wants relief from such distress. Those who are just curious, they're just inquisitive, just a passing. And those who are actually seeking the absolute truth, those who are knowledge, jnani. Does anyone remember how Rupa Goswami categorizes these 4 into examples from the Shastra? There are 4, yeah, you remember? You know that, but you don't remember. Okay, sure. Does anyone know? Okay, so let's start with those who desire material benefit or wealth from the Lord. Who does Rupa Goswami give an example of? Come on. Dhruva Maharaj, thank you. Wake up. Then what about those who are desiring to be free from distress? Does anyone remember? Gajendra, very good. Those who are curious, inquisitive. Close. Sages of Naimisharanya, yes. And then those who are Gyanis? Who said that? You said it? Oh, okay. Sorry, I heard it coming from that direction. Very good. 4 Kumaras, yes. So, we have these 4 examples Rupa Goswami gives. And of these 4 examples, we're reading of Dhruva Maharaj. He approached the Lord for material desires. And the Lord is so grateful that to any of these 4, He calls them Udhara, broad-minded. He calls them broad-minded. Can anyone remember from Bhagavatam where Krishna, or where it's mentioned one is broad-minded from approaching the Lord that way? Can anyone remember? Suniti says it, yes, but I'm looking for a sloka specifically. Yeah. Akama sarva. Yeah, please continue. Yes. So in this section of Bhagavatam, it's the second canto, I believe, first chapter. Sukadeva Goswami is speaking. In this section, Sukadeva Goswami, the first couple of verses, he says that if one has material desire, one should worship this demigod. One should worship that demigod. One should worship this. One should worship that. And then after 9 slokas, then he says, Akama sarva kama va moksha kama udharadi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusha param. That akama sarva kama va, that whether one has no material desires, one is full of material desires, or one desires liberation, if you're really broad-minded, one will engage in devotional service. Tivrena, intense devotion. Tivrena is like a laser. It's light, but it's focused in a particular point, right? To the extent that when one looks at the laser, you're risking damaging your eyesight. That's how intense the light's ray has become. Yeah. So that focus, that determination, when one performs yajeta purusha param, one should worship Krishna in that way. Udharadi, one who is broad-minded. Yeah. So I was looking into this actually last night about this udharadi, and particularly about worshipping the Lord. There are given 2 terminology given. There's sakama and akama bhakta. Sakama and akama. Sakama means, sa means with, so sakama means with desire, with motivation, material motivation, right? And akama means without material motivation. One time, I had brought some people into the temple, and I was, teaching them about who Prabhupada is, and I was showing them the deities. And they were locals; they had no idea what deity worship, anything about Krishna consciousness. So I was just talking to them, and I was explaining this is the statue of our spiritual master, our founder of this Hare Krishna movement. And within a space of 11 years, like 69, 70. Yeah, within the space of 11 years, he traveled the world something like 17 times, like that. I was explaining to them, this is what he did. He sacrificed so much for this Krishna consciousness movement. And the reason why he's glorified throughout the world is because he did it without any motivation. And I was explaining to them it was pure devotional service, and then I explained to them, showed them the deities, and I left. And apparently at that time I didn't notice, but there was a Prabhupada disciple there. And later on, she had spoken to Ganesham Prabhu. And Ganesham Prabhu was telling me that she was very appreciative that I was explaining Srila Prabhupada. But I'll never forget this point. But she said, when you explain to others about Prabhupada being pure, always explain to them that he had no material motivation. He had no selfish motivation. Because the mentality we have is that when someone has no motivation, what is it? We immediately think of, nirvana, liberation, nothingness. Get rid of all sense desire, get rid of everything, just become liberated, become peaceful. But she was saying, no, you should specifically mention that Prabhupada had no material motivation. That Prabhupada was doing it 100% for Krishna's pleasure, for his desire, not his own. And then you'd be able to relieve or prevent others from thinking in the wrong way. So this is Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was completely free of all material motivation. Everything was 100% for his spiritual master and for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when you think about it also, our situation should be like that as well. We should come to that platform of akam, that we should be able to give everything to Krishna for Krishna's pleasure. But our situation is that we are sakam. We have some material motivation for approaching the Lord, unfortunately. There's some desire, some distress, so we approach the Lord. And that is glorified actually. It is glorified that one approaches the Lord for anything, because that's real intelligence. In the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, you read about all the prayers of all the devotees in all sections of Jambudvip. So you'll hear about the prayers of Narada Muni. You'll hear the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. You hear the prayers of the devotees of Harivarsh. Excuse me. You hear the prayers of Hanuman. Right? So you'll hear the prayers of all these wonderful devotees. At the end of that section, it'll talk about the demigods. And the demigods are looking down on Jambudvip, specifically Bharatvarsha, where we are residing. Right? And they're looking down and they're glorifying. Wow, how wonderful it is for these personalities to be able to be taking birth in. Can you just pick up that beanbag? Yeah. To take birth in this material, in this Bharatvarsha. How wonderful it is, because they get the opportunity to worship the Supreme Lord. But then they explain that actually, unfortunately, there are many worshippers of demigods in Bharatvarsha. Right? And unfortunately, they are approaching them to satisfy their desires. But here's the thing. Although they're worshipping the demigods, Krishna accepts the worship as if they're worshipping his limbs. Because the limbs, the demigods are non-different from his own limbs. The demigods say that the worshippers offer demigods their oblations, considering the demigods parts and parcel of the whole. So they understand that the demigods are parts and parcels of Krishna. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead accepts these offerings and gradually raises the worshippers to the real standard of devotional service by fulfilling their desires and aspirations. Because the Lord is complete, He offers the worshippers the benedictions they desire, even if they worship only a part of His transcendental body. So the demigods, they're glorifying that, even though they may do worship of the demigods, still knowing Krishna to be the Supreme, but wanting to have some desire fulfilled, still Krishna satisfies that desire through the demigods. And we know that in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that when we worship the demigods, we're actually worshipping Him, but just simply His limbs. The next verse, let's see if I can get it. Next verse is a very famous verse. This is the verse that is mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita in connection to how a devotee or a soul comes to worship the Lord with material motivations. This is the demigods. This is 5:19:27. It's a very important verse to memorize, actually. The Supreme Personality of Godhead fulfills the material desires of a devotee who approaches Him with such motives, but He does not bestow benedictions upon the devotee that will cause him to demand more benedictions again. Okay, so He gives benedictions, but in such a way that you never desire more. What does that mean? You're satisfied. Yeah. However, the Lord willingly gives the devotee shelter at His own lotus feet. Even though such a person does not aspire for it, that shelter satisfies all his desires. That is the Supreme Personality's special mercy. Yeah. So this is Krishna. If you want to know more about Krishna's mentality, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu explains that Krishna says that a devotee may desire something more than service to the lotus feet of the Lord, but if he engages in the Lord's service, Krishna gives shelter at His lotus feet, even though he may not aspire for it. The Lord says, He is engaged in my service, but He wants the benefits of a person who asks for poison instead of nectar. That is his foolishness. I am experienced. Why should I give such a foolish person the dirty things of material enjoyment? It would be better for me to give him the shelter at my lotus feet. I shall cause him to forget all material desires. If one engages in the service of the Lord for sense gratification, the result is that he ultimately gets a taste for serving the lotus feet of the Lord. He then gives up all material desires and wants to become an eternal servant of the Lord. So yes, on one side we have this warning that when you approach the Lord, it should be pure devotional service. But on this other side, we see our position, that we're not quite up there yet. So then it's recommended that we should continue serving the lotus feet of the Lord, because Krishna will take care of us from then onwards. You know the example of the monkey and example of the cat or the kitten? Yes? Prabhupada one day, early days, Prabhupada, they're going for a walk. Prabhupada finishes his walk, and then he's about to get into his car, and he sees one of his disciples, and she's pregnant. No, actually she's holding a child. So then while seeing her hold the child, he asked her, so cat style or monkey style? And she was, sorry, Prabhupada? Cat style or monkey style? And then Prabhupada explains that actually you see, the yogis, they're like monkeys. When the mother monkey is taking care of her children, when she jumps branch to branch, the baby monkey holds on to her for life. And there are cases when the monkey jumps from mother jumps branch to branch, and the baby monkey has fallen and passed away. So Prabhupada's explaining that a yogi tries to attain Krishna by their own endeavors, but it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. Whereas a cat takes care of the kitten. Have you seen a cat holding a kitten? It'll grab it by the neck, and the kitten will just dangle there. It doesn't have to do anything. The mother cat will take it from place to place. So in the same way, a devotee just simply practices devotional service, knowing very well Krishna will take care. Krishna has given the shelter. Krishna has given protection. He will take care. My only duty is to satisfy his senses. That's it. Right? So that's cat style. So we follow in that footstep of the cat. No. We follow the footstep of Prahlad Maharaj, who took shelter of Nrsimhadev. Right? So here, that's the main point I wanted to mention today. So I'll wrap up with this. That it looks like performing devotional service with some material motive is being rejected here. And it is being rejected. How long do we want to continue worshipping someone with some motive at hand? Right? And I'll tell you this is condemned by acharyas in one particular example. Those who have read Krishna book will remember this one, specifically Vrindavan pastimes. There's one particular, not just Vrindavan, actually this is in the Dwarka Leela. One particular personality whose mentality is condemned for having this material motive. Does anyone know? Devotee, but material motive. Sorry? Akrura? No, Akrura was the pure devotee. Kubja? Yeah, okay, I'll take that. Yes, it fits the category. But there's someone else I'm thinking of. Come on, shoot some names. Kamsa? Yeah, but he's completely unfavorable. Come on, someone had said it. Indra, come on. There it's specifically mentioned that when Krishna went, actually it was on the request of Indra that Krishna went and killed Bhaumasura. That please, he has taken my mother's earrings and taken the umbrella of Varuna. You know how embarrassing that is? Someone come and steal your mother's earrings even though you're such a great personality. Right? It's like a complete humiliation that you can't even take care of your mother's earrings. Right? So he has to come and put his head down at Krishna's lotus feet, completely humiliated, telling Krishna that, and you know umbrella, right? Varuna's always having an umbrella over his head. That's part of the worship his followers do. And right in front of him, Bhaumasura has taken it away. How humiliated. And these personalities, these demigods, they're like Lokapala, right? They're the head of the demigods. Okay? They're not small-time demigods. So it's a great embarrassment on the part of the demigods for some demon just to come and take these small items. And Bhaumasura knew what he was doing. Right? It in fact mentioned that Kamsa took Bhaumasura's help. He made an alliance with Bhaumasura, Bhanasura, all of these demons that we hear of. Yeah? So not small-time demon. But anyway, the point here I want to mention is that he went to Krishna humbly and took his benediction or his blessings to be able to get the items back from Bhaumasura. And Krishna in one shot did so many things. He satisfied so many criteria. But at the end, he saw, when he went back to Indraloka, he saw Parijat tree. And Satyabhama said, I wanted that tree. Krishna said, okay, and he took it. What did Indra do? Indra fought back. That how dare you take the Parijat? It belongs to the heavenly planets. It only belongs in the heavenly planets. Actually, what he's thinking is that it's my tree. You don't take it without my permission. It's for my enjoyment. And the acharyas condemned this mentality because this mentality is what's prevalent in the minds of materialists. That as soon as the material desire is satisfied, they no longer care for the person who's given it. It's like a business transaction, and Prahlad Maharaj condemns it. When Nrsingadev was begging him, please take, literally Nrsingadev was saying, you take benediction. He said, no, I don't want anything. No, you take benediction. He said, okay, my father, that's already done. You take the benediction. Then finally Prahlad Maharaj is telling, look, my lord, you are my master, I am your servant. There's nothing more than that. If I ask for anything, it's simply a business transaction. Just like a servant comes to the master for money, an employed servant comes to the master for money. As soon as the service is done, the money is paid, the employee doesn't care about the master anymore. But I don't want a relationship like that. I am your servant. I don't know anything else. So, yadidasya sime kaman, varamstam varadarshava, kamanam hridi asamroham, bhavatastu hridevaram. That, the best of all givers of benediction, if at all you desire to bestow a benediction upon me, please let there be no trace of material desire within the core of my heart. So, along with our prayers to the Lord, we can beg, please, I want this, I want that. But along with that, we should repeat the prayers of the previous acharyas. By chanting Hare Krishna, we are doing that my dear Krishna, my dear Srimati Radharani, please engage me in your service. There's a second half that I always like to remember. Prabhupada says that I am, I can't remember exactly, that I am fed up with serving the material nature. Please engage me in your service. Right? It's either you serve Maya or you serve Krishna. So by chanting or repeating the prayers of the previous acharyas, we start to develop that mood of serving Krishna without any material motive. By chanting Hare Krishna carefully, following the instructions and avoiding the 10 offenses, we gradually purify the heart to the extent that we slowly desire more and more for Krishna's pleasure and less of our own. And it's those periods of time, like for example, we just had Janmashtami, and many of us would experience what it's like to do service at least for that period of time, for hours on end. There's that satisfaction. You fasted, you've practically neglected what you usually do day in, day out, taking care of the body, taking rest, I need this for my mind, this, that, and you just engage in service. And the satisfaction you get after that, nothing can compare to that. Right? It may have been, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, whatever, but that was pushed aside for Krishna's service, and Krishna, being very pleased, gave you that glimpse of eternal satisfaction, the deep satisfaction within the heart. And it's these small things that we should use to further our Krishna consciousness. But unfortunately, we're very expert in using those, coming to a point of strength, and using that to dive deeper into Maya. Right? We come to Krishna consciousness battered, destroyed by material existence. And Krishna builds us up just so that we can jump back in and become battered again. And it will save us so much time if we just accept that, Prabhupada says you should stop cooking with smoke and start cooking with fire. You have wood, and every time you engage in devotional service, you're fanning the spark of devotional service, making the fire grow. And every time you satisfy your senses, you're pouring water on that fire. Okay, you're pouring water on that fire, it's fine, it douses, but it takes a long time again for that fire to come up. Why? So therefore you can see Dhruva Maharaj's lamentation. But here's a special quality of this lamentation. It's inspiring him to do more devotional service. It's not stopping him. That lamentation is there, but it impels the devotee to think, okay, I'm such a rascal, but I am going to now do better to serve Krishna, so that he will recognize me, so that I will get his mercy, that Srimati Radharani will recognize me, so that she will recommend me to Krishna. And this is how a devotee advances in Krishna consciousness. Therefore you see, Queen Kuti, she prays for more obstacles. Let there be obstacles, more and more and more, because in that way we'll always be with Krishna. They'll always remember Krishna, and Krishna will always be with them. Right? So, I pulled things from different places, but the core message I wanted to mention, was that, yes, we approach the Lord in ignorance, but the Lord is so kind that He'll give us His lotus feet. He will purify us of these material contaminations. So you don't need to fear. Practice Krishna consciousness. Chant Hare Krishna. It is a guaranteed process. It will fructify. The fruit of love of Godhead will fructify to the extent we invest in our Krishna consciousness. It's up to us to how fast or how quickly we go back to Godhead. But it's guaranteed. It's a surefire method. You don't have to worry a single thing. You simply have to practice Krishna consciousness and be happy. But practice only Krishna consciousness. You should not mix it with material desires. Okay, so I'll end here. It's 50. I'll take maybe a couple of questions if there are anything. Yes, Prabhu. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Bhakti bhav, the emotional dynamics of a devotee is beyond the material realm. In material existence, ideally what you explained would work, but it doesn't work that way. Prabhupada gives the example of how a woman will go through childbirth, and after going through childbirth they'll think never again, but immediately they'll out of the affection of having a child, they'll go through it again. And Prabhupada gives the example of the elephant. They'll take a bath, but then again they'll throw dust on the body. This idea of, we make a mistake and we'll move on. But in the material nature, Maya doesn't let us learn from our mistakes. You will see that same mistake come up again. This idea of moving on after making a mistake is an ideal circumstance within material existence. It doesn't occur. Maya won't let you happen. It may not be this life, the next life you repeat it again. And what was the original mistake? That we left Krishna. We desire to enjoy our senses. Yeah. In spiritual life, everything is used. All types of emotions are used to propel one further in Krishna consciousness. You see, Dhruva Maharaj is lamenting here that I had the wonderful opportunity to serve the Lord. Right? He gives two examples here. I've prayed for useless things, just like giving treatment to a dead body. And the second thing is, for that person who could cut the link of birth and death, that bondage, I've asked for that from him again. Right? But what is he doing here? He understands Krishna's position. He understands his position. And he's understanding that how have I ended up in this way? I could have gone back to Godhead immediately, but now I'm here and I have to do this. I've approached him in the wrong way. But then you have to see here that Dhruva Maharaj will use this to further his Krishna consciousness. That's the main thing. Anything that will help us further our Krishna consciousness, we gladly accept it. That lamentation, that's healthy. Does that make sense? So Dhruva Maharaj is not showing some sort of weakness, material weakness. This is his position of strength, because now he'll always remember that actually it's by the mercy, by the strength of my spiritual master, by the strength of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that I was able to become liberated from this entanglement. I was able to become purified from thinking of this material enjoyment. this material desire. Does that make sense? Yeah. In our lives, it's always a good opportunity to remember where we came from and where we are. It helps us stay humble. You know how I was mentioning we use that position of strength to go back into material existence? That's arrogance. That's not humility. When we get to a position of strength, that's when if we're humble, properly situated in Krishna consciousness, that's when we'll use those facilities in Krishna's service. And Krishna will then give us more facility for his service. And then more, and then more, and more, and then more. But if he sees that you're misusing the facility, he won't let you progress any further. You'll learn from that situation somehow or other. You'll face impediments, you'll face guidance, you'll face some sort of impediment to help you learn from the mistake and move on. Yeah? Did I answer your question? So it's not a weakness on behalf of Dhruva Maharaj. It's his emotions. Say for example of Ajamal. Ajamal is a very similar mood. After the Vishnuduta saved him, the lamentation he explains there, he goes to such intense lamentation, he says, okay, that's it. I'm now going to engage all my senses in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he goes to Haridwar. So in the same way, Dhruva Maharaj, he'll now engage his whole life as the Lord wanted him to do, in sacrifices, in performing sacrifices for 36,000 years to glorify him, and then he'll go to Dhruva Loka and stay with the Supreme Lord in his abode. Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll end here. You had something? Yes? No? Yes, Prabhu. Nothing? Okay. Alright, we'll end here. Thank you very much. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande.